So, okay.
Hold on. Well, Laura, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yes. Thank you for having me, Arlena.
Yeah. I got an email from, I think, your publicist, and they sent me this amazing book. And if you're listening to the podcast, you won't be able to see that I'm holding it up, but it's called the DBT Workbook for Alcohol and Drug Addiction, Skills and Strategies for Emotional Regulation, Recovery, and Relapse Prevention. All very important things.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so we'll dive into the book and your story. But first, I like to play a little game I call the lightning round, which is very slow, very, very much a misnomer. I need to think of a different name.
Okay.
But I like to front load the episode with some resources. So when you first found recovery for yourself, were there any books that helped you, early in recovery?
Well, I got clean and sober quite a while ago. Using the standard 12 and 12 in Big Book, and also Each Day a New Beginning. Came out a few years after I got sober.
When did you get sober?
September 7th, 1976.
76.
Yeah.
So it's been a minute.
It's been a few minutes.
76. My goodness. I'm going to have to ask you about how things have changed. Yeah, because I got sober in 94 and there were not a lot of books even then about recovery. So 12 and 12 and Big Book were probably some of the few books available at that time in 76.
Yeah, Living Sober, that was another one.
Yeah, all the classics, right?
All the classics. Yeah.
That's awesome.
All the standards, yeah.
All the standards, yeah. And I named the podcast One Day at a Time because it really helped me overcome this idea of being afraid about staying sober, quote unquote, forever.
Mm-hmm.
What does one day at a time mean to you?
One day at a time means just that, one day at a time. I too initially struggled with, oh my God, I'm only 19. How could I stay sober forever? Like, I'm not even legal age yet to drink and I'm quitting. It's not fair.
It's not fair. How am I going to get married and not drink champagne?
Yeah, baby, the whole bit,
The whole thing.
Yeah, all the celebrations, which our culture is surrounded, drinking is so much a part of our culture.
Yeah, it really is.
Goodbye parties, weddings, funerals, whatever, birthdays. Alcohol is a big part of any celebration.
Yeah. Literally every event, sporting events, waking up for someone.
Well, for us, waking up.
that was an event in itself. Do you have a regular self-care practice in terms of things that you specifically do for your recovery, like maybe a morning routine, or do you have like a weekly routine at this length of sobriety? What does that look like for you today?
My morning routine is reading something spiritual or out of a recovery literature, doing meditation, maybe following a meditation such as Tara Brach, or maybe doing a silent meditation.
My favorite.
Yeah, she's great.
Have you been doing the rain meditation at all?
Oh yeah, that's in my book too.
I missed that. Yeah, that's my favorite meditation for processing feelings to resolution, sort of like on a daily basis. That's a good one. So you do guided meditation? Do you also do silent meditation?
Yes. Yeah. I also do silent meditation, and then I go for a nice long walk with Truffles, my dog. And
I thought you were gonna say you're eating chocolate while you're walking.
Oh no. So that's my morning meditation, and then 2 times a week, Tuesday and Thursday, I work out at Orange Theory, and then on the weekends, I'm an avid cyclist, so I usually cycle both Saturday and Sunday. I've done AIDS Life Cycle twice, which is
Wow.
a 550-mile ride from San Francisco to LA in a
You've
week.
done that twice?
Yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah, thank
I'm
you.
afraid to ride my bicycle on the street. I've seen too many people get hit by
I know
cars.
it
It's
is
a little bit
getting more
scary.
scary. Yeah.
Look at you. You're an adrenaline junkie.
I think it's more keeping in shape, but
Oh,
yeah,
okay. That's probably what it is. No, oh, okay. That's it. Yeah, that's a really good yeah, exercise is huge for me for staying sane.
yeah,
So
for
that's
recovery,
awesome.
yes.
And what's the one thing you wish you knew when you first got sober?
Uh Boy. Um,
That was a minute ago. You were 19 years old when you got sober?
yeah.
That's amazing. I'm still stunned.
Well, I was originally 17 when I went in rehab. Um, let's see. What's one thing I wish I knew? Boy, a lot of things, but I think uh to more trust the process, have faith, um, that what is seems so, imperative and important today, I probably won't even remember a year from now. So, um,
Isn't that the truth? Man, I remember somebody saying to me one time, just if you get twisted up about something, just ask yourself, is this going to matter in 10 years?
yeah. Or in
And I'm thinking,
Al-Anon, they say, how important is it?
right. How important is it? So you
Yeah,
do both you're 12 step oriented. You do both 12 step in recovery addiction and in Al-Anon.
right. And I mean, I've been in many of programs that end in A.
Same girl, same. Yeah. It's so funny because once you kind of get into, recovery, let's say in the beginning, it's so we suddenly become aware of ourselves. Like we go through this self-examination process, become aware of ourselves. And we're like, wow, I have like adult child issues, drug
Right.
issues, food
Like
issues,
for stress.
shopping, workaholism.
Yeah.
I just named all my things. But
Yeah, the onion is peeled and we, keep going inward to find uh, what else is there.
yeah, what else is there?
Yeah.
Going inward. That is for sure. I really like the idea of trusting the process. For me, having faith was difficult. Did you develop a faith or did you grow up with faith? What did that look like for you?
I grew up with faith. I grew up in a Catholic family. Our family was Catholic, although uh, there were a lot of things about the family that didn't espouse Catholic values. But anyway, I did I did have faith, and then I which one I'll tell my story. I went through some traumatic events, and since then, I know people talk about struggling with the concept of God. I didn't really struggle with the concept of God in terms of recovery. I did, however, struggle with the concept of God. So I came out as a lesbian when I was about 3 years clean and sober. And then I really struggled because it was, God hates gays and my
Mm,
family was not happy, to say the least. And society, you know, we just shouldn't exist. So I really struggled, and also was angry at God because I didn't want to be gay. Like, why did you do this? Or why is this
yeah.
thing? My trajectory that I saw for a lot of people in the program was you get sober, you get married, you have kids, get the house, 2 cars in the garage, and that was not my route. And so that was a real struggle too. Like, how am I gonna? There were no real role models for families, and I definitely wanted a family. So that uh, took a while to find, my tribe and find a way to have my family. Yeah.
Yeah, that's we'll have to get into it because you were going through that process at a time that was very different than how things are now.
Oh yeah.
So why don't we start? Why don't we just go back a little bit? Maybe you can, in 12-step rooms, we're accustomed to sort of sharing, what it was like. Do you want to, can you sort of describe what your childhood was like and what happened to lead
Yeah.
you to addiction and recovery?
So what it was like, I'm the fourth of 8 children. Um, 8 children born within 10 years. So it was chaotic. Um, there was neglect. There wasn't enough food. Both my parents drank heavily, but my mom later became alcoholic. My brothers and sisters, most of them had alcohol or addiction issues. But those didn't really come out until, so growing up, I was born in Southern California, raised there until I was 13. I was bullied a lot in my family, unfortunately bullied at school. So there was no safe place for me. During the summers, I just felt like I was on a life raft. I couldn't wait till school started again because of the trauma happening at home. And so school, I sometimes joke in the room, school became my drug of choice because I was in the library a lot or reading at home just to try to get away from the bullying. And when I was 13, the company my dad worked for was bought out by 3M and we all moved to Minnesota. And that was a huge shift and change for everyone. My dad was born and raised in Minnesota. He didn't want to go back there. The rest of us, we'd never been there. My mom was Californian. And so their drinking increased. And that's where, maybe I'd have a drink or two on the weekend with friends when I was 12 and 13, but my drinking really took off after we moved. I was just starting high school. It was the easiest way to make friends, was the drinking and drug crowd. And so, oh, I hear Truffles. Come here, Truffy. Come on. You want to come to the interview? Yeah. Oh, you want to go outside? Okay, okay. All right, honey. All right. So, drinking, smoking pot every day, drinking every day. Then when I'm in 11th grade, I'm working full time, going to school full time, trying to keep the quote look good by getting straight A's while having this split lifestyle, being the drug addict and alcoholic. And I started taking what they called White Cross then, or now it's
Oh, yeah.
amphetamine. Yeah. So I became instantly addicted to that. I struggled from depression and I've never felt like normal or whatever it's called. And then, although then I start getting paranoid and it was just really wreaking havoc on me and my life. And so in the beginning of my senior year, I decided to quit doing speed, but then I really hit a deep depression and despair. And I would go into the family room every morning or the kitchen and just sob every morning. And like after a week, my mom said, I'm going to take you to get help. And so I saw a psychiatrist who gave me an antidepressant. And back then, they didn't have the disclaimer on medication that if an adolescent is taking antidepressants, there's a higher risk for suicide. They didn't have that back then. So, or that warning. A couple of weeks later, I felt like I couldn't, Arlena, take one more step. I could not take one more step. And also, the risk of suicide is greater for adolescents in the sense of you don't have the perspective at 17 like this too shall pass, because it's been 17 years and nothing is passing. Nothing is getting better. In fact, it's getting worse. So I went into my parents' medicine cabinet. I took about 200 sleeping pills. My dad just thought it was high or just put her in the room. I blacked out. I don't remember what happened. My mom, uh, her gut told her something else was wrong, found the pills in my room or the pill bottles. They called the ambulance. I flatlined in the ambulance. I was dead on arrival. I was in a coma for a week. I flatlined again, like after 3 days. They called my parents. They came back. I had my last rites. So it was a pretty rough week. And the thing is, when I woke up, I wasn't happy. I was like, not this shit again. I have no tools. I do not know how to navigate this world or myself. So I was really upset, and they put me in an adolescent SAC unit, which I lived in Minneapolis at the time, and they're very progressive, the birthplace of Hazleton.
Mm-hmm.
And they had someone from AA come talk to me. They had me do a full alcohol and drug history. And the someone came in from AA and said, I don't think you're crazy, but I think you're alcoholic and you should try, go into a program. And if you don't like being sober, you could always have your misery refunded. And so I was like,
Yeah.
Okay. But my parents were like, no, they were
They didn't
not.
want you to go to AA?
No, not AA, a rehab. I
Oh,
knew if I went home, I would try to commit suicide, and I would succeed. I knew that I would
wow.
not last there.
Yeah.
And I wasn't safe there, and just not a good situation. So I talked with her more about it, that I wanted to go. I talked with my parents, and I guess they looked at a couple of them. At the time, there was this big split, like heroin addicts and
Right.
then people who are chemically dependent. And so most of the rehabs were for heroin addicts, like you would wear a sign. It was like Synanon. It was very antiquated and
What do you
old,
mean wear a sign?
like I am an addict.
Like you
Or
would like wear
yes,
a physical,
literally.
like over your head, there was oh my
Yeah,
God.
yeah, that's what they used to have in rehabs back
Oh
then.
my God.
Yeah. So in a way, I could understand they didn't want me to go, but so she helped me get emancipated. And then I'm, have not a time to my name. And the county paid for treatment.
Wow.
And then like a month later, my parents came around and they came to family group, and my mother was confronted on her drinking. But it was the best time of my life. I
Mm.
was just like, wow, I thought I died, went to heaven. I felt this is what a family's supposed to be. It was primarily an adolescent unit, ages 13 to 25. And I mean, the food, they had to like reteach me so many things, or teach me so many things. And I like sometimes would go until 5 o'clock and have not eaten a thing. Now, some of that was there wasn't any food, and some of it was I was on drugs or alcohol. So they'd say, okay, this is breakfast time, Laura. You eat breakfast. This is lunch. You eat lunch. So just some real basics, like in terms of self-care. I started keeping a journal. My therapist, my counselor gave me a journal. And I think like the second day I wrote, so a
Oh,
lot of,
I'm sorry, your audio cut
I said,
out.
I think I'm a lesbian. So I was
Oh,
very, I
you
had,
whispered it. I think I'm gay.
yeah, so I was uh, a lot of shame and
Oh,
fear
yeah.
there. Yeah,
You didn't have any role models back then.
zero,
Is this
zero.
so? This isn't like 74. This is
This
like a
is
couple years.
74. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Was Billie Jean King out and a tennis
That
player?
had just come, I think about a year later, that whole
Wow.
scandal came out. And
It was a
um,
scandal.
I know, well, I mean, she was married, but of course, back in the day, that's
To a
what,
man?
oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there weren't options back then. A lot of
Oh,
gay and
right, right,
lesbian
right. Of
folks
course.
had to get married. So,
Yeah.
or that's just what you did, that there were
Yeah,
no,
of course. I sound so ignorant, but yeah, it was a long
no,
time ago.
so I went back, moved in with a bunch of folks to what today would be called sober living. And
Oh,
then one by one, each of my friends started going back out. They were like, oh,
mm,
I don't think I'm an alcoholic. I'm too young. And then I thought, oh, I think they're right. I'm too young. I'm only 17. Um, but I didn't have the dramatic bottom that I did when I was a year ago, or when I was just turned 17. But it was still, the social drinking or controlled drinking experiment did not last long until I got into old patterns. Like I would be having a conversation with you, Arlena, and then thinking about my controlled drinking at 5 o'clock on Friday. I get to have a drink, and I wouldn't hear a word you're saying because I was so
isn't that
focused on I'm
amazing?
having that drink at 5 on
Yeah.
Friday. So
Don't
about a
you
year,
find, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think it's so important to acknowledge how important that answering that question is. Like, am I really an alcoholic? Like, it's
mhm,
so important to answer that for yourself,
yeah,
not by society standards or whatever, but to answer
yeah,
that question for yourself. I think that's uh, paramount.
yeah. I mean, as they say, I had to do more research.
Yeah.
Um, And then, the second time around, it wasn't really even a bottom. I just knew where I needed to go,
Yeah.
and so I went back into the rooms of AA. Now, when I was 3 years clean and sober, just shy, I'd been in therapy, and my therapist kept asking me if I was suicidal. And I lied to her because I didn't want to go back in a psych ward,
Mm,
but I didn't know what was happening to me. Like I'd see in the rooms, people are going like this, and I'm going like that.
mm.
And it was really confusing and, more despair. And here I am clean and sober and still feel horrible. Um, and I called my sponsor like at 3 in the morning and one night, and she came and took me to a rehab, even though I hadn't drank, but I wanted to be in a safe place. And they did a bunch of tests, and they find out diagnosed with manic depression or bipolar disorder.
Mm.
And that was a worse bottom than uh, when I tried to commit suicide, when I had started drinking again. That was a worse bottom than all of them.
Was
Uh,
it the labeling of your condition, or was it
no, it was
just
the
the point in
feeling.
time?
I mean, having manic depression, your mind's going 100 miles an hour. My
Yeah.
best friend in AA, we're both 46 years clean and sober. She said I was talking so fast, and she could only understand like every few words.
Wow.
My mind was going 100 miles an hour. Plus, there's this deep despair. You wake up sobbing.
Mm.
I took a leave of absence. I was in my senior year of college. I was working at an adolescent rehab, took a leave of absence there, going to 5 meetings a day and drowning, and just
Wow.
did not understand what was happening. And that was happening. Manic depression symptoms are very severe, and very high suicide rate,
Mhm.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um, So I didn't want to take any medication because at that time in AA, if they kind of,
Oh, the nothing no matter what
yeah. And
mentality.
so you're not sober if you take anything.
Yeah, it makes me a little crazy.
So my women's group, my Tuesday women's group. So my family during this time moved back to California. I didn't even know it. I didn't even know they all left.
You were still in Minnesota at this
Yeah,
time?
I'm still in Minnesota. They all left because they said, why don't you have your family here? And then I call them and they're like, well, we're in California. And
They didn't even tell you that they moved?
I didn't even know they were leaving.
Did you,
So
but did something happen within your family? Oh, was it the coming out as gay that
no, it
estranged you
was
from your
more
family?
alcoholism.
Mm,
It was a couple of my brothers involved in criminal activity. It was just a bad situation.
yeah.
Um,
Did you actively separate yourself from your family, or was it just like a
I
natural?
no, I did. I did for years, actually.
You weren't able to talk to them and just to stay safe, right?
Just basically, I mean, I would talk, but I actually ended up moving to New York for 10 years, and I think I saw him once or twice.
Wow.
So that was a way to really separate myself. But But anyway, yeah, the manic depressive symptoms are very serious. I had uh, deposits on 4 different apartments when I was looking for a place. And then I was going to go look at a 5th, and my sponsor said, no, because you'll put another deposit. And then that deep despair. So finally, my women's group said, they were my family in the family group. It was so sweet. They got me a t-shirt that said winner, because I felt like such a loser.
I
Like, here I am,
know.
3 years clean and sober, and I want to kill myself again. I mean,
Yeah.
what is going on? And I didn't realize the severity of bipolar disorder. And so they said, look, the psychiatrist said you need lithium for bipolar disorder. And I said, no, but then AA will say I'm not sober. And they said, no, if you leave here without being on lithium, then this family will not support you. And
Wow.
so that was a very big intervention, because they were the only family I had. And
Yeah.
so I said, okay, I went on lithium, and I felt like after a few weeks, oh my God, this is how people feel on a normal basis, a regular basis.
Wow.
No severe up, no severe down. And I was on lithium for about a year. And then I thought, well, I feel better. I don't think I need it anymore,
Oh,
which was a bad mistake.
yeah.
Yeah.
You hear that a lot. People that are they're on medication and then they want to get off. What was compelling you to want to be off of it?
Well, part of it was the attitude in the rooms that was still there, that attitude. Part of it was, my sense was with medication, like you take antibiotics and soon you feel better and you're not on
Oh, right.
antibiotics.
Yeah.
So
It's
part of it was,
cured.
yeah, so I'm on, medication, so I'm going to be quote cured. And I've been very stable this year and
Yeah.
felt good. And it wasn't a big like difference when I went off it. It was very gradual, but uh it was just not a good situation going off it. No.
So did you end up back in the same place of the dark depression and suicidal thoughts?
No, it's weird. Then I became a therapist and a psychologist, and I took this bipolar training workshop, and the whole thing was about irritability and anger. And I said, oh my God, that's me.
That's me. I've heard that
That's
so many
bipolar
times.
disorder. Because,
Yeah.
in the beginning, it was different. And I remember I started with this new therapist, and he said, when's the last time you were on a mood stabilizer? Because he took my history, and I said, what's today, Thursday? I said, about 35 years ago. He was like, what?
You went 35 years without medication?
Well, I was on antidepressants off and on, but
Off and on.
antidepressants are not because the main thing I suffered from, the main symptoms were depression. Um, and so, I mean, usually as a therapist, you're supposed to take a thorough history, but that's
Right,
another
right.
subject.
You
And
mean
antidepressants could trigger a manic, so that just wasn't good. Yeah.
antidepressants can trigger a manic episode? I did not know
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
the medications for treating clinical depression are different than the medications for treating bipolar disorder.
Oh, yeah. Major
Yeah.
difference. Yeah.
So that's like a Prozac versus lithium.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, different things.
So
That's
finally,
amazing.
I go on mood stabilizer. But in the rooms, it's funny. I would hear people like talk about their like how it was, and I said, I feel like that's how it is. Like my life still feels like that. That was before
Wow.
I said, and I mean, by this time I'm in a relationship, and my partner and I decide to have a child, and so I have a baby girl, and but it just wasn't a smooth ride either in my relationship with my partner. Her and I fought a lot, and then with my daughter, and I just didn't get it. I was in therapy. I'm like, I don't understand why I'm so irritable all the time.
And your
And
therapist didn't
no,
recognize the
not
need?
that one. That one, I don't know. That one was a box of rocks. Anyway, I felt like I should have sued her, but I Anyway, it didn't.
Yeah.
But the new one, he was like, no, this is, so anyway, but by that time it was like I needed to do a fourth and fifth and eighth step for the harm my bipolar symptoms had caused,
Mm-hmm.
in my relationship, in my relationships with my daughter, with my employers. So there was a lot of wreckage there, and it was really upsetting. Yeah.
I'm sure.
And
Wow,
then,
that's
so where I ended up today is, so a few years, like 5 years ago, my daughter left for college, and then I really sank into a deep depression. They tried everything, nothing worked. And then they suggested transcranial magnetic stimulation,
uh
or TMS, which instantly triggered a manic episode, and the
oh,
worst I've ever had in my life. It was really scary. My partner and I in Baltimore, from my daughter, at this time she's in college. None of my support systems there. My therapist, psychiatrist aren't there. And so when I came back, I just, again, I went on leave I was on disability for a year and a half. I went to meetings every morning, and then I went to an outpatient program called for DBT. That was the name of it. And in that program, during one of the groups, the therapist said, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. I said, oh, I've heard that a lot in AA. I said, but the how to not suffer has always eluded me. I mean,
right.
there just weren't a lot of tools for it. And DBT has tons of tools for how not to suffer. And that's when a light bulb went off in my head and said, oh, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to, because I know DBT tools would just add more tools to someone's recovery in their toolbox. And then COVID hit, and it was the perfect time to write the book.
COVID was very productive for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of books came out of COVID.
Yes.
A lot of
Yeah.
really
A
amazing
lot of books and babies.
and babies. Not in my house. Well, let's talk about your book. Thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you.
I have friends who have bipolar disorder, and I have watched them suffer, and it's just heartbreaking. And so I did not know that TMS could trigger
Yeah,
episodes. So that's really important to know, that not every treatment is good for everybody. There are certain things that we
exactly.
need to watch out for.
Yeah.
So let's start with the basics. What does DBT stand for, and what is it?
So DBT stands for Dialectical Behavioral Therapy. And it is a three-pronged therapy, meaning the first part is cognitive behavioral therapy. This is where we take a look at our thoughts, and usually they're negative thoughts that in turn affect our mood, and then our behavior, and then our action. So one of the tools they give is what's called the thought record, to look at what are we saying to ourselves. And usually it's so distorted. They call it cognitive distortions, and they go through a whole list of them. And
Can you
I
give me an
think
example of a cognitive distortion?
one cognitive distortion is mind reading. So, you
Like, I know
know,
what you're thinking about me.
yeah,
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
so you're two minutes behind. I'm thinking, oh, she doesn't want to do the podcast anymore. She decided I'm not a good candidate to interview. We make up what we think other people are thinking, or we make up the gaps. Like, let's say someone doesn't call when they're going to call. Oh, they really don't like me anymore. Oh, but it tends to be skewed. It's always to the negative.
Yeah.
Always.
Can I tell you something funny?
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought you were 2 minutes late, and I was like, uh-oh, she didn't accept the invite. She got busy. Isn't that funny?
That is funny. See, that's what we do.
Yeah.
Probably was the one that was 2 minutes late. Yeah, I think I was. But anyway, so, but that's what happens. Mind reading. Yeah. What's some other one?
Okay,
Oh,
mind reading.
nothing.
That is actually a good one, is that we project, I've often heard that we just are making up stories all day long.
We are making up story, but not only making them up, here's where we really get tripped up. We make up the story,
And then believe it.
we believe it, but then we act on that story.
As if it's true.
Yes, and that's where we get in so much trouble.
Mm.
We get in so much trouble because then we'll see our friend and confront them. Oh, you didn't call me because I wasn't important enough. And they're like, what are you talking about?
Your friend's like, I was busy thinking about me.
Yeah, because
You
we
know what's
usually are.
funny? I had a girlfriend call me yesterday, and she was like, she met somebody new. He's Mr. Right on all accounts. Excuse me. And they've been together for a little while, and she's like, oh, he didn't text me, I love you. So that must mean he's losing interest, and
Right.
nothing could be further from the truth, right? Like they are a match made in heaven. But it was so, and she recognized it. She was like, I'm making up a story. But you know what
Right.
I thought was so interesting, Lauren? I wonder what this is about. She had like an awareness that it wasn't true, but she
Mhm.
still felt shitty.
Yes.
What
Okay,
is
so
that about?
she had the first step because that is partly what they're teaching in DBT. First step is awareness. Wow, this is a, you know, negative thought, a cognitive distortion. It's not true. And then the feeling that goes with that. So awareness is the first step. And then, but it's like a what do they call that? Like an after effect. So let's say you come in from the rain, you're still dripping wet. So you have this awareness that that's not true. He does love me, but we still have that residual feeling
Yeah.
of, oh, I still think he doesn't love me. But that passes the more we practice, intervening with our negative thought process. And then those negative feelings tend to go quieter and down.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is, I know her history. It's like this fear of abandonment. She has complex PTSD from,
Mhm.
she was a child of a, excuse me, hold on. She was a child of an addict. And so she had a childhood history of abandonment or
Yeah,
not getting her needs met. And
right.
so as an adult, when something feels off, it's like a familiar pattern her brain goes into. Is that something that can be, I don't think that ever goes away entirely, but
No,
can those triggers be lessened?
yes.
Okay.
They could be lessened by, like I was just saying, gaining
Mhm.
awareness and then
Awareness.
using different tools to intervene. Also, with complex PTSD, EMDR is very helpful, um, along with using DBT therapy.
Yeah.
But does it ever totally go away? No. I had a situation a couple of weeks ago, and I was so upset with myself and my therapist. So I have a lot of trauma around because of my family with groups. And so, meaning I tend to, here I am in a group event with cyclists who I know care and love about me, but initially meeting up with them, there's just so much fear. And I've done the EMDR and the trauma, but I still sometimes come in right under the wire because I don't want to deal with that potential bullying and abuse. And I was driving in to the spot we were meeting and they were all riding out. And I was so upset with myself. And I remember calling her. I said, oh my God, it's still happening. She said, Laura,
Yeah.
it's never going to totally go away. Look
Yeah.
at all the times now that you've faced that fear, you've healed. It's never going to be 100%.
Right.
And so then to just, not just, but to have compassion for myself and for your friend to have compassion for herself. And that
Mhm.
is also part of DBT, to learn compassion
I
and
feel
to
like compassion is the key to healing. Like the longer I'm sober, the more I learn the more I recognize that compassion and self-acceptance, Tara Brach talks a lot about.
Yes.
She has the radical self-acceptance and then the
Yeah.
radical
And that's
compassion.
in the book. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so going back to what DBT is,
Uh-huh.
it's cognitive behavioral therapy. And
Okay.
then it's the meditation, the radical acceptance, the self-acceptance, meditation. And then the third part is the dialectics. So as addicts or alcoholics, or probably a lot of people, we tend to have black and white thinking, either or.
Mm-hmm.
But the dialectic is both and. So I could feel really down and depressed, and I could also do some self-care or reach out to someone. So it doesn't have to be either or. I feel so down, depressed, so therefore I have to just stay in bed all day. No, there are things you could do. I gave an example in the book. We're going through the pandemic, and I know that this too shall pass. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's not, oh no, the world is ending, it's Armageddon. No. Or
Kind of
like,
felt like Armageddon for a
yeah,
minute there.
or the rooms have an example, when we have a flat tire, we call 911, but DBT would say, you have a flat tire, you call AAA, you call someone for help. That's the both and, instead of
Yeah.
these extremes that we find ourselves or get ourselves in.
Yeah. No, that's really good. I'm still a little confused. What does dialectics mean? Is there like a definition? Well, I'm sure
Well,
there is.
the way that Marsha Linehan describes it is both and,
Both
but
and.
let me just find a cheat sheet really quick here.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh,
Mm.
wait, here it is. So an example of dialectic is it's snowing and it's spring. It's a dialectic is when two seemingly conflicting things are true at the same time.
Mm.
So there is the pandemic and it's going to pass. So they seem conflicting, but they're both true. Yeah.
So that's so in terms, I look at everything through the lens of recovery. So those of us who have sort of that catastrophizing, like when something goes wrong, we tend to catastrophize. I always relate everything back to self-esteem. Like if I make a mistake, it's hard, it's hard to resist the thought. It almost comes up automatically without even, it's like, oh my God, I'm such a loser.
Right.
I'm such an idiot. Like if I do something stupid, I go, oh, and that's the first thing, right?
Yeah. And well, here's an excellent example. Dialectic is acceptance and change. And there's better results from both than from either alone. And I have a quote in the book from Dr. Carl Rogers that until I accept myself just as I am,
Mhm.
not going to change,
Is that so? It's kind of like a paradox.
Yeah, it is kind of, but they call it also a dialectic.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I love anything that will help me sort of change behaviors, right?
yes.
So in early recovery, people listening to this kind of tend to fall into two camps. One are the people who are thinking about getting sober or at the beginning stages of getting sober. So
Right.
quitting the addictive substance. But then there are those of us in long-term recovery who've been through like many rounds of the steps or therapy or EMDR. I mean, I've done virtually all the I've tried it all. I'm greedy that I used to try all the drugs. Now I try all the therapy. And so now it's about behavior change. How can I accomplish the goals? Like what's standing in between
Yes.
me and the goal that I want, which
Exactly.
is a lot of times around habits or taking action.
Mhm.
How would you, and I actually want to talk about the book because I'm thinking like how I feel like there's like this recovery resistance, right? There's like this resistance to doing the things that we know we should be doing or could be doing. And
Mhm.
there is this resistance. What is that resistance? I am thinking it's probably fear, but how do you think of it?
Well, that reminds me of, I remember going through my graduate program, and the professor talked about that when people come into therapy, they don't necessarily want to get better. They want to learn how to manage their neuroses better. So, meaning a
Oh,
lot of us don't
interesting.
necessarily want to change. We want to manage better the mess that we're in, or our life as it is, because change is really scary, right? So we'd
Yeah.
rather initially, I think, out of fear, um, kind of want to keep things the same, but how to manage it a little bit better. Um, or like for alcoholic drug addicts, how could I do controlled drinking? I don't necessarily want to quit altogether, but what is the magic equation? Like some of us have tried.
Yeah.
Let's have only drink beer, or only hard liquor on the weekend, or any
Eat
chemical
first, drink a
equation.
glass of
Yeah,
water between drinks. Yeah.
but quit altogether.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge. And I think that's why that even if we want to change, there's so much resistance.
Yeah. Yeah. It is scary. Yeah, I think in my own life, I had a manuscript. I wrote a manuscript and sent it off for,
Oh, congratulations.
well, I sent it off to a developmental editor and she gave me some feedback. And I think it was so painful to hear at the time. I am so grateful for the feedback that she gave me. But then it was like, oh, shoot, now I got to rewrite like a whole bunch of it. And so I just kind of shorted out and have not been able to get myself to move on it very much. Right. So I'm in this place where I'm like, okay, is it my fear of failure? Is it my fear of success? Is it my is it my need to feel safe? That's, like
Writing is so challenging.
it's
I
so
mean, this is
hard.
my second book, and this was even 10 times harder than the first one, it seemed. And there were so many obstacles all along the way. And believe it or not, AA was the biggest obstacle. The World Service Office had a total meltdown. They didn't want me
Mm,
using the steps in the book. I said,
mm.
there's 130 other books that have used the steps for any number of problems, but I was the one where they were wanting to stop at.
That's why
So
I'm
in my book,
self-publishing.
what?
That's why I'm self-publishing.
Oh, well,
I'm a
I mean,
control freak, so
this
there's
is an
that.
aside, but I could help you find a publisher if we could talk offline. But
Okay, I'll reach out.
depending on what your book's about, I could give you some.
It's called the 12-step exploration guide.
Oh,
Yeah, it's really to provide context and perspective because this is what this is what I see in recovery resistance is especially the 12 steps. My argument is that it's a worthy endeavor and that people bump up against certain very common problems like the word God, the word alcoholic,
right,
powerlessness. People get confused. Like it says powerless over alcohol, but people get stuck on powerless, or they get
right.
stuck on God, or there's dynamics. They think it's a Christian program, and there's that can be argued whether it is or it isn't.
Right.
Um, but from my perspective, there are ways to get around these obstacles so that you can make forward progress. So it's really adding context and perspective so that people can get around these limiting
Yeah,
beliefs or
yeah.
obstacles to make forward progress, get the benefits of the program.
Mhm.
But
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
but I feel so strongly about it, and yet I can't seem to get myself to move on it. I'm like, I'm stuck. And so I'm thinking, is this something in my mind that's making me feel stuck? I'm just going to turn this into a therapy session. Is that okay?
Here's what helped me.
Okay.
Um, I got a writing partner, and also who was also an editor at the same time.
Oh, that's convenient.
Um, but it's really hard when you're stuck, like, because I had a different editor for
The first
the
book?
book when I was zooming through it, or not zooming, but I was making some progress. And then when AA said, no, you can't use the steps, you
Mhm.
have to rewrite it. I was like, um, and I was very stuck. I just
Yeah.
avoided it. I was going to dump the whole project. And then, one of my friends said, get a writing partner, get a writing buddy, and you write together. And so we crafted out several times a week that we were writing. And then she would also review my stuff, my writing. I didn't necessarily review hers because that wasn't the contract. And it really just pushed me along. It was like
Mhm.
a gentle bulldozer kind of going through. But and in DBT, they also call it body doubling. So this is where if you just really are challenged, like I suggest to a lot of my clients, a body double, meaning you have someone there with you, either
Ah,
online or, for me, I had this person with me.
yeah.
I mean, I invited her to come to the house. Um, because online wasn't going to cut it for me. I needed someone right there basically to hold my hand.
Yeah.
And then, we didn't have to necessarily be in person after I got through this phase. But uh, body doubling really helps motivate people to keep you on track. They even have, one of my clients told me about, it's called Mates, Mates, and it's free. And it's an app, and they connect you with someone you don't even know. You don't share any information. And you just say, hi, my name's Laura. I'm working on this chapter. And they say, hi, I'm working on my trigonometry. Great. And then you both work for an hour and then you're done. I mean, but it helps.
Okay. I'm totally going to check that out.
It really helps. Um,
Okay. I'm totally going to do
Focus
that.
mates, that's what it's called.
What is
Focus
it? Oh,
mates.
Focus Mates.
Focus
Okay.
mates. Yeah.
Focus Mates.
Um,
I will check that out.
I mean,
Um,
ideally it's helpful with a friend, but don't
yeah.
give up this book.
Oh no,
This book is needed.
I've tried to let it go, but it feels like a calling. Like
No,
I
it
feel
is
like,
calling.
yeah, it feels like a calling. It feels like this is something I need to do.
There's so
eh,
many people that are stuck because
yeah,
exactly what you're talking about, Arlena,
yeah,
because they can't get past the idea. Like for a lot of women, a couple of years into recovery, I went to Women for Sobriety by Jean Kirkpatrick. And it's a totally different program for women because so many women struggle with the idea of powerless. Like we feel powerless our whole lives. Why do I want to say that in recovery?
yeah.
There's a lot of, and there's just so much, he, and it's like,
Yeah,
so that was and I did that
that's
program for
another
a
thing.
couple of years, but it just didn't have the grit. So then my friend and I, who we have the 46 years, went back to AA and said, we just need something more solid.
Mhm.
Um, but your book is needed. And
Thank
because
you.
there's clients I know that I work with that get stuck, they get tripped up on the God thing, and then they don't go to 12 step at all.
Yeah.
And
So
they're just
yeah,
a
it's a
dry, they don't, it's,
it's so
you got to
sad
keep
because it's
moving.
like it's that suffering thing.
Yes.
It's
Yeah,
needless stuff. Like that pains
it is.
me. It
Yes.
pains me to see people suffer needlessly and
Yes.
to pass up on this really it is magical. It's a magical transformative process. If you can just, and so the driving force behind the book is to offer context and perspective,
Right.
and
And kind
so,
of, it sounds like, okay, here's some of the detours.
yeah,
So you don't have to go that way. You don't have to,
yeah,
swallow it whole.
yeah,
Take
you
what
don't
you
have to
like and leave
swallow.
the rest. And
Yeah,
here's
take what
some,
you like and leave the rest. And then for women, I think safety is a big thing that's important to me for the women in the program. And maybe it should just be a book written for women. But there is a predatory element in mixed meetings that really disturbs me because the court system is sending people there that don't really belong there. right? It's kind of a catch-all, and it's not the hotbed of mental health. In fact, it's meant for people with mental illness. So you get a lot of people with a lot of different dysfunctions all in this same room. So I
Yeah.
think for women especially, there's some things to be aware of, you
Yeah.
know,
And maybe just
and
go to women's meetings. I
and
mean,
just go to it. Yeah, you know
yeah,
what's
I
funny
mean,
though
a
is
woman in my own meeting just had that experience. I thought, wow, this is 2023. This is still happening.
yeah,
It's
people are still
incredible.
people, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's,
People.
and you hear horrible stories sometimes, and I was shocked. I thought it was supposed to be a safe place, but maybe there's a
Mhm.
reason why it's anonymous, many reasons. But I know you have to go in a few minutes, but I meant to spend more time on your
No, I
book.
have 15 minutes, so it's okay.
Okay. Well, okay, so I'm looking at the table of contents of your book,
Yeah,
and I just kind of want to call out a few things. I had
sure.
many things, all these little tabs on your book that I
Okay.
intended to, but I just want to sort of talk about the table of content. So it's this, step one is I can't stop. Step two is hope. Step three is surrender. So I see what you did. I thought that was really brilliant, was to really talk about the principles behind
Right.
the
So,
steps.
and then AA was happy.
And
They
then
World Service gave me a gold star.
yeah. Yeah, it's which is fun. It was another way around, right? There's always
Yes,
a way around.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Bruce Lee said to be like water, just flow.
Yes. Yeah. And water
um,
is the strongest element, could take down anything.
isn't it amazing?
Yes.
And what I thought was really interesting, I love step 7 and step 8. So for those of us who are in long-term sobriety, it's easy to start thinking that you know something, or that where I got hung up is thinking I knew what was right for someone else.
It, it took me a long time before and also I think it's a hazard, occupational hazard being a therapist.
Right, right.
Learn to stop myself when someone shares something and say, would you like feedback? Because I was so quick to jump in
Yeah.
and give it, and even before,
Oh,
so now I ask, would you like feedback?
would you like
And
to? I
nine
think
times out of 10, they don't.
they did. Yeah, I had a sponsor early in recovery. I'm so lucky I had good sponsors, but I would call her to complain about my now husband. And I'd be like, Bobby did this, and Bobby did this. And she would be like, number one, I don't sponsor him, bitch. And then number two, she'd be like, she would stop and ask me, do you want me to just listen? Do you want feedback? What do you want from me? And it was the
Good.
first time anybody had ever asked me that. I was
Yes.
like, and truth be told, Laura, I did not know.
Okay.
I did not know what I wanted. But I was like, let's try all of that. So she would
Yeah.
listen, and then I'd be like, okay, I'm done venting. What comes up for you? She would say, I'll share what comes up for me.
Right.
Yeah. But I thought that was very interesting early on. Nobody had ever done that for me. And I think my greatest victory was when my brother called me one time, and he was sharing something with me. And then I was silent, and he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm not offering advice.
I'm listening.
I am listening. He was like, oh my God. So that was amazing. But humility, back to step 7, humility, I thought was tied to humiliation, and I didn't want any of that.
Right.
But what is the value, as you see it, what is the value of humility?
The value of humility is being teachable.
Yeah.
We come in thinking, or a lot of us, that we know everything. You can't tell me nothing. And humility is being teachable, getting rid of that sometimes arrogance, or just being open. And because by being teachable, I don't necessarily mean that you know it all. It's also like come from a family where you were already supposed to know it all or know what to do. And I remember when I was in training, internship to be a therapist, I kept apologizing, like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. And my supervisor finally said, how could you know? You just started. But I thought it was some kind of character defect that I didn't know what I didn't know. So, so humility there was being teachable and saying it's okay to not know. That's what it is. Or for me, or was, I didn't know it was okay not to know. I
It's
thought you just
okay.
had to know, or
Yeah.
otherwise you were a zero, a piece of shit. So
Yeah.
I just would make it up that I knew. And my counselor or therapist and sponsor said, just allow yourself not to know, see what that feels like, and say, I want you to practice saying, I don't know. That was so hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but being
I-
teachable is my main definition of step 7.
yeah. And I think it's so
Excuse
interesting,
me, one
especially,
second. Truffles,
oh, sure.
Truffles is done with the session. Come on.
Troubles.
It's so funny. She knows a 50-minute hour. She is
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have my dog sitting outside my door. He's like, time's up. He runs my life, and I'm okay with that. Yeah. So being okay with not knowing, I think part of, living with shame because of addiction requires us to sort of overcompensate with accomplishments and achievements, and knowledge is one of those things. Like I felt like I had to figure it out. Right. So and for people who are actually thinking about doing the steps, they read the steps and they're using their own interpretation of the
right.
steps and dismissing it. And I know this is like really offensive to people who feel that way, but what's happening is you're relying on your own uninformed, you don't have experience, right? And so you're relying on your own uninformed opinion to make a decision. And so I think a lot of humility is to consider that there might be more context and perspective. Yeah. Um, so another thing that I recognize that happens to a lot of us in recovery is this feeling of not good enough. And what I love about your book is that it's a workbook. I am such a sucker for a workbook because it often has exercises that I hadn't even considered. And on page 85, there is an activity of self affirmations, which I thought was really helpful. It says, using the guidelines and examples above, write down one self affirmation a day tailored to your own goals and desires. Why is it important to practice self affirmations?
Well, like you were saying earlier, when with your self-esteem, and then you said, oh, I'm such a loser. We have said for years so many negative things about ourselves. And so affirmations are a way to start digging out of that hole of negative self-esteem, of negative thoughts, and statements about ourselves. I had an exercise I would do with clients. On one side of the column, write down everything, all your negative self statements, and the right side, the positive. And usually there's none or one. So I have them every day. They have to write down at least 3 positive statements and then tell them to themselves. And it just, because it takes a long time to counteract all that negativity.
Yeah.
We just, I have a saying in or on my website, I think it is, or no, maybe it's on my Facebook page, that we can't beat ourselves up into changing.
Mm-mm.
And that's partly what would happen for me too, thinking if I verbally beat myself up, then that would change something. Well, no, that just makes you go lower.
Yeah,
So
that's like expecting someone to run a marathon on a broken leg. Like it doesn't make
yeah,
any sense.
yeah.
Yeah, and listen, if it worked, we would have been better already.
We would have been running marathons too.
All right. Well, I'll wrap this up by saying I think everyone should get this book. There's so much, we touched on tools, but the truth of the matter is we barely scratched the surface. There are so many tools in this book, and I'm a sucker for the tools. You said something earlier in our conversation about, it's sort of like this idea that there's work to be done. And oftentimes we don't know what the work is. And so that's why I love a workbook, because it's so helpful. I mean, it's so easy to get overwhelmed. So it's so helpful to have a guide that breaks down sort of step by step,
Right.
things that we can, it's like the self-examination, it's the exercises, it's the different thoughts and context and perspective. So I want to tell you that I think you did an amazing job on this book.
Thank you, Arlena. I appreciate it. And could I say the title one more time?
Yes.
Or you could say the title.
I'll hold it up, but it's the DBT workbook for alcohol and drug addiction. And the tagline is skills and strategies for emotional regulation, hugely important, recovery and relapse prevention. That's also a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for this time that we spent together. I could talk to you all day. I felt like there was probably a lot more we could have said, but all that is needed is in the book. So I'll leave links to it in the show notes. If somebody wants to reach out to you directly, how can they find you?
So they could call my office number, 415-771-7150. My Gmail is Laura Petrachik@gmail.com.
I'll leave links in the show notes in case people that are listening are driving.
They could contact me that way too.
Yeah. Is there a website that you can?
Yes, Laura Petrachik, PhD.com.
I should have been calling you doctor this whole time. You said I could call you Dr. P.
Well, it's
not Dr. Laura.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time today.
And thanks, Arlena, for the
so many good nuggets, and I wish you all the best.
Let me know about your book. I might have some suggestions.
I will. Maybe I'll reach out to you. I'm going to call your office, shoot you an email, and be like,
okay, yeah, please do.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It was great talking to you. Okay.
You.
Bye-bye.